You're hearing like slight windy noises.
No, I'm hearing like I'm not
It's not
sure what
like
it is. It could
because
be
there is like a window open here.
no. It sounded like high talking or like
Oh,
squeaky
okay.
talking. The kind
No,
of
it's not that way.
no, no, it's all right with the weather. I wouldn't ask you to shut a window or anything. Actually, we could open it. That'd be nice. What? Put the lights on. All right. Blah de la blah de blue blah blah. Hello, Lewis.
Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Right. All right.
Good, good. Welcome everybody to Games Up Podcast. My name is Cameron McCulloch-Keeble. You know what it is. You know how we do this. Have you had a good week, my friend?
Yes, very good. Been playing lots, but busy week.
Busy in a good way?
No, yeah, yes.
Good, good.
Yeah, a bit of a mix.
Okay. I'm glad to hear it. I have been pushing through a bunch of the new Overwatch event. It's very good fun, very hard as per usual, and got a bit more distance on Far Cry 5. Also glad to see the London Spitfires picking it up. 2 losses so far is not good. So let's get into the show. We start this week, as we start every week, or most weeks anyway, with the news. So let's get into the news. Lewis, the first piece of news here is about heavy PC gaming, and so you give us the details here, because I have no idea what's going on in this story.
Okay, so in China there was an event, a press event, where Dell has revealed their 8th generation Intel Core i gaming laptops. With specifically focused at this event was the power of these laptops allowed you to use plugins or cheats, as we can call them over here, on their laptops, and how many of them you could use on their laptops to get an advantage in games. To say of the exact words, it was the person doing the event said how Chinese gamers are the most innovative and dominant in the world by using plugins to run faster than other players or blow up 10 cars at a time, and that though these top gamers can really use 8th generation power to run more plugins to win more at chicken dinner. Yeah. So 8th generation Dell power will give you the edge. It's interesting, but saying the top players use more plugins to give them the 8th generation Dell edge into gaming, and it's an interesting tactic. I guess it speaks a lot about maybe how Chinese advertisers work compared to over here. Yeah, so I don't know, a bit worrying.
So gaming consoles haven't been available in China for a long time at this point. The ban was only raised recently. How relevant is the PC market in terms of gaming to China? You're likely to know this better than I am.
So the PC market has kind of surged in China, actually. In recent years, Steam has very suddenly seen the rise of Chinese gaming.
Okay.
To the point where there's been many games that have been review bombed because of them not having Chinese translations. So there's quite a lot of interesting stuff on Steam with it at the moment. And there's a little bit of politics there, but there's a lot of stuff going on with that. But yeah, so there's definitely a big rush with Chinese gaming, and there's a lot more all of a sudden on the market.
So is this likely to translate into the rest of the world, or is this just something they're tailoring for the Chinese releases of this hardware?
It'll definitely be only the Chinese market. I don't know if you know too much about this, but there's been a big push for isolating China or region locking PUBG.
Right. Okay.
Essentially making that Chinese players play with Chinese players, and everyone else plays with everyone else, because there's been quite a big rise of cheating in PUBG.
Right.
That a lot of people are worried about, and that's kind of, it's interesting that that's the way that they're going to go to advertise this to Chinese players.
Okay.
But I don't see it coming over here.
I mean, I suppose if the capability is in the hardware, it will translate to some extent, but it doesn't. I feel like the Western market specifically will get more, the power of it and so on and so forth. That tends to be how Dell and a lot of PC people advertise, in my experience anyway.
And you have to consider that something else that's kind of interesting about the Chinese market is that because they have not had consoles in the same way as us, and because they haven't had games in the same way as us, um, previously some of the most popular games in China have been, mobile games and kind of really awful PC games. So instead of kind of focusing on, look, you can play, I don't know, Witcher 3 on 4K HD or whatever, I don't know. Their focus is something else.
Yeah.
Because I guess, that we would always strive for graphics, whereas I think they wouldn't because of the fact that they're kind of new to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're still like... It's not like saying they're in PlayStation 1 era, because that's like a very specific kind of thing, but they're in the PlayStation 1 equivalent of what the Chinese gaming market will become.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right, the next piece of news this week is that Boss Key Productions, the people who used to be associated with Epic and are run by Cliff Bleszinski, and made Lawbreakers, the game that was fairly dead on arrival. It was a hero shooter. This is the one where they released a bunch of stuff on Unreal, wasn't it? Or is that Paragon?
That's Paragon.
I'm getting two things mixed up, sorry. Lawbreakers was by Boss Key. It was also a hero shooter. It had a kind of cool gravity mechanic. Well, they are now, as is their tendency, following the trends and making a Battle Royale game. It's called Radical Heights. Its main hook is that the Battle Royale is set in an 80s-style arcade world, and it seems to be that what you do is fight for money first, which you use to buy weapons before you fight people. So it's sort of adding another stage into the Battle Royale picture as it is at the minute. Lewis, any thoughts on this?
So I'm quite interested in it. It's already out.
That's true, yeah.
But it's in extreme early access, apparently. It's basically an alpha. And yeah, I think interestingly, there's been a lot of kind of hatchet jobs in the media about it.
Right, okay.
There's been quite a lot of kind of, this game hasn't sold 1 million copies yet. But I think so. I think there's room for more on the market. It's not so bad if there is another one, like in terms of PUBG and Fortnite. I think there is room for someone else to come along and kind of get some interest. I think when Fortnite came out, we had kind of the same thing as people kind of going, "Oh, this isn't going to do very well." PUBG's already a thing, we don't need another game, and I think it surprised people. I think there's a chance this could do it as well. We just need to be given time. It seems like it's been quite a successful run, though, isn't in the sense that, they obviously needed some sort of cash injection, and that's why they've released their game so early.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to have got quite popular, or popular enough, to get them something.
For where it is.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, there's a chance we might talk about it later. There's a chance we won't. It really just kind of depends what goes on.
I think I slightly disagree with you. I'm already a bit tired of people chasing the Battle Royale formula. I think new IPs and new ideas and structures for it make a lot of sense, and so a game like this is on the better end of it. But I think with so many companies chasing Battle Royale modes like GTA and Wildlands and so on, I think we're sort of at that tipping point, much like we were with hero shooters, where there's been a sort of very intense period of them, and now is kind of the fight to be who survives it. Yeah,
that's fair. I think I look forward to Halo 6 Battle Royale and Red Dead Redemption 2 Battle Royale.
You're probably not wrong, and that's going to be a very interesting year.
I'm telling you now, Red Dead Redemption, it's got a Battle Royale mode.
Haven't we said that 4 or 5 times on the show at this point?
Well, that's how sure we are. Yeah.
All right, number 3 on this week's list is that Xbox added a bunch of OG Xbox backwards compatibility titles, and some of them are serious surprises and very welcome. The list includes Morrowind, Battlefront 1 and 2, the original PlayStation 2 and Xbox games, KOTOR, basically a huge amount of the original Star Wars games. There's, I think, Starfighter, there's Jedi Academy, there's the ones that people have been clamoring for, as well as SSX3, and of course everyone's favourite, Blinks the Time-Sweeping Cat. So, yeah, just whether you play it or not, whether you have the ability to play it or not, I've been trying to find a Battlefront 2 disc for Xbox so that I can play it, and it's surprisingly difficult. People have ramped those prices up quite a lot. But whether you play it or not, massive props to the backwards compatibility team here, because like that can't be an easy task to do, especially with like licenses having shifted and games being so old and the dev teams moving on. That's got to be quite an undertaking, and they've done it with serious care and attention here. So whether people pick it up or not, good for them for doing it.
Yeah, definitely. And I also largely promote Morrowind, even though I will say it's probably one of the most unfriendly games out there. Well, as in, like, if you come along from, like, even Oblivion or Skyrim and expect the same kind of, like, hand-holding and kind of niceness, you're not going to find it. Like, it's one of those games that you can mess up. There's some RPGs where it's like, if you choose the wrong options, you've screwed yourself. And that Morrowind is one of them, and, like, the original Fallout games are like that.
I'll give my promotion to Battlefront 2. I think it's still genuinely the best Battlefront game that's ever been made. The mechanics are incredibly tight. Unfortunately, the multiplayer won't work because the servers have been offline for so long that it couldn't translate, and that's the case for all OG Xbox games. That's a shame, but the split screen still works, and you can still system link with like original Xboxes, so a lot of the features are still there, so give it a try.
It also had a pretty good, like, bot mode, and it,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was still one of those games that bothered with that kind of stuff, so it's not like too bad without it.
Did a bird just tweet outside your window?
Yes.
That is... We'll keep that in because it's quite nice. But yeah, that was a lovely sounding bird. Number 5, Cyan Interactive have been using Kickstarter this week to fund and announce their special 25th anniversary collection of the Myst games. The Kickstarter has been doing surprisingly well as well. All 25 copies of the $1,000 tier were sold out within 8 hours of the Kickstarter going live, and it now stands at $824,000 of its $250,000 original $250,000 original total. Buggered that one, didn't I? But my goodness, what a success this Kickstarter is.
Yeah, so the Kickstarter's done very well. Essentially, this is nothing. It's not like remastered or like remade. These are the original games packaged together, and what you get for what it's being kickstarted here is actually the special collector's edition, which essentially is a big book of them all. Awesome. There's a book in the game that's like really important, and this is kind of that, but an actual working version depending on how much you spend. Like the final version has like an LED screen that you can interact with in the game, or something, I don't know. Yeah, it looks really cool, and it's clear that people are really excited for it. Even though, as I say, it's just the original games repacked, so they clearly have quite a large fan base for this. And I'm wondering if someone at Cyan isn't going like, we should remake Myst again, or we should make another Myst.
I was going to say, you've got to imagine that this is their way of going, look, major publisher who still makes these kind of games, there is this much interest for a game that we didn't even remake. Haha. Like, it's very clever marketing if it works. It's also nice to see Kickstarter still being a good home for video games. Kickstarter was kind of built a great deal of its momentum off the back of stuff like the Oculus when they were still both in their infancy. So it's nice to see games still having success there for the right reasons. I'm looking at you, the man who made Mega Man. Speaking of things doing incredibly well, A Way Out has sold 1 million copies, which EA has said was more than it expected to sell its entire lifetime. This is firstly good because A Way Out, I haven't played it. I've watched it played through though. I've seen how it all takes place and how it all happens, and it looks like an awesome game. I think I probably won't because I feel like it's experiencing that story first that's important. But yeah, it looks like an amazing game. What I also really like about this news story is I love how EA have an ability to say something that seems kind of silly and ill-considered to the gaming community, and then shows that by having their own success. Like, I love how when Star Wars Battlefront came out, they said, no, this is fine, we've considered this, it came out, it didn't sell, and now it's kind of damaged the reputation of it. Then they were like, no, we're not going to look into single player, we're only looking into like online service games, and now their single player game is like one of their biggest selling things in years, and far more successful than they thought it would be. Maybe it's time that they listen to the people buying the games a bit more. Seems like that would be the thing you take away from all this kind of news.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe listen to the market,
Yeah. But not listen to the market, i.e. the bit that's selling well. Listen to the market, i.e. all of it. We kind of know what we're on about a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of things not doing so well, Swery 65 re-released his Kickstarter for The Good Life. At this point, it's about halfway through the time that it has to get funded, and has made just under half the money it needs. Now, to give you a quick sort of dive into Kickstarter, you tend to find that there are two major pushes for Kickstarters. It's right at the start when people are announcing things and it's still new and fresh and everyone's surprised, and then right at the end when the people who are a bit bandwagony, aren't sure if it's going to work or get funded, add their voice to it and you get a final push. That tends to be the way that Kickstarter works. It's start, boring middle, and then big end. At this point, it's like halfway through, halfway funded, so it could go one way, could go the other, though it's not looking too positive.
Yeah, you're right in that it's usually beginning and end, but you kind of, for something that's like this, that you would really expect the marketing push to be there, and it has been pushed by loads of different news sources, you'd kind of expect it to be maybe like 3/4 of the way through by now, and then that last push being enough.
Yeah.
I think yesterday it made like 10,000, just what it needs to make, which is a lot higher. So I don't know, it could go either way, but I'm not overly too hopeful for it.
The next story is a whole bunch of game announcements. Shenmue 1 and 2 have been announced for PC, PS4 and Xbox, although only PS4 in Japan. At this point, we're unclear whether it's an HDified version of the collection. We're inclined to think it's not, though Sega are talking about how it has a whole bunch of added features and more, so maybe that will be an announcement later down the line. We think it's just the original games repackaged, though. There's a potential announcement for Doom 2, as a representative for Bethesda said that they're currently in the Hell on Earth period for preparing for E3, Hell on Earth being the name of the sequel to the original Doom, so maybe a bit of a tease there. I'm thinking it might be a little bit shaky, though. Speaking of shaky announcements, the game director of Nier has said that there is a possibility of another game definitely coming out. So that's good. Sony's animation studio that usually helps in animating other projects are recruiting for a new unannounced IP with another studio, and artists are being recruited for the development of Halo 6 with 343 Industries. There's one more game announcement that we need to go over, but we'll get to that right at the end because it's a big one. Any thoughts on any of these, Lewis?
I'm excited for Nier whatever in 10 years.
I'm excited for Nier concept art because that's probably all it is at this point.
Yeah. The Doom 2 thing, I reckon that's pretty much solidified. Because I think like the talk said, E3 is like hell on earth time to us, and I'm like, it just doesn't really flow very naturally. It doesn't sound like something someone naturally would say. I think someone's like very cleverly put that in and been like, aha.
I know what you mean. It does seem to sort of on the nose to not be the case. The bit that gets me is like how quickly that will have been turned around, because Doom isn't that old. It came out in 2015, right?
I think maybe even 2016.
See, I was thinking that as well. Let me have a quick look into this.
I will say that I don't think it's too unlikely. Considering the style of game that Doom is, I think it's actually not too difficult to turn out another one. Maybe even on the same engine.
So I looked into it, and yeah, it came out in May 2016, which means at this point the game isn't even 2 years old.
Yeah. As I say, I think it's entirely possible for that kind of game to turn out quickly.
I don't disagree with you, but I will say that I think something that they need to be really careful of is putting it out too quickly. Doom was clearly given the time and space it needs to do what it did properly. And I hope that if there is a sequel, that it's out in 2 years because it's ready, not because it needs to be.
Yeah, definitely. I think I wouldn't be surprised though if Bethesda are looking at this point to kind of be like, we need something on the table. We're at E3. And although they've said that they've got a diverse set of announcements, I also can't really see it. we know there's a few things we're expecting from their talk, but it's quite minimal.
Will be very interesting one way or another. Number 9, Stardew Valley multiplayer is supposedly out very soon. The developer recently tweeted saying that he was still working on it and that depending how things fell, he was hoping to have it out, I believe, by the end of this or the next month. This is very cool. I have been told many times to get into Stardew, but I haven't got round to it.
Yeah, it's a very enjoyable game, and maybe if you do get it, we can play online together.
Yeah.
But it's one of those games that like it's very addictive, but you can't maybe quite say why. But yeah, no, I think I'm very excited to play it and play with other people with it.
Cool. Speaking of new things being added to games, Ghost Recon Wildlands, which is somehow still fairly well going, is getting a Splinter Cell mission. There's 2 reasons why this is interesting. Firstly, the Splinter Cell mission references the death of Solid Snake. There's quite a nice little line in it where somebody says to Sam Fisher of Splinter Cell, there used to be this other guy and he wore a bandana but he's gone cold, and Sam quite pointedly looks at the camera and says, oh, it's just me left then. The other reason this is interesting is because it's adding even more fuel to the fire of a suggestion of a new Splinter Cell game. Kind of important for you, kind of interesting if Ubisoft says, oh, it's just me then, and then we don't hear from a couple of months. Seems like they're kind of pointing us in a direction there.
Yeah. So first of all, we were talking about games that have been pulled from the brink of not having a good launch. Somehow this is, we said it's Ubisoft games specifically, and it really is, because this is the 3rd game that we can talk about that had an awful launch.
Yeah.
And is now somehow a popular game that people play. So yeah, it's crazy, and I am really kind of hyped for whatever Splinter Cell thing would be happening. Blacklist is a really good game. That's the latest Splinter Cell game, and I think it's about time as well. So I put this on my list of things that I'm really, really expecting.
Yeah, I am with you. I think Splinter Cell's great. Blacklist is good, but I didn't play a lot of it. That's on me. That's my own fault. The one that came before it was an incredible game, and they've had enough time to have done it properly at this point. So that's a good sign, I would say. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now is the point of the show where I put my microphone down and hand over to Lewis, because Lewis, that God of War's doing all right, isn't it?
Time for the Sony shill to talk. So I'm telling you this. Next week, I'm going to try and get God of the Year trending on Twitter.
Trending on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so the embargo was what happens to an embargo? Broken? Stopped? Released?
Passed.
Ended? Passed. The embargo passed. And all of the reviews came out all at once on midnight, which was great. And yeah, it's got 95 on Metacritic, which is ridiculously high. I think it puts it as the highest PS4 game that isn't GTA.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tempted to say. And so there's been lots of talk, and loads of people have come out and said it's one of the best games they've played at this gen.
Yep.
And loads of people told me not to read reviews, so I'm not.
Oh, okay.
So I can't talk too much on that side of things. But yeah, so it's done really well, and I'm looking forward to playing it. If it's as good as people are saying it is, then I think I'll be whinging about it next week. If I can take time off to actually whinge about it, because I might be too busy playing it. Yeah, so also interestingly, it seems to be taken down from Amazon.
Oh, really?
Not just... Yeah, well, this is the thing. I don't think it's sold out. It's actually taken down. Potentially because there's been too many orders, is one of the theories. Is that there's so many orders that Amazon can't possibly deliver them as opposed to fulfill them, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
If Amazon have to deliver 10 million objects, I don't know how much. 10 million is very high, isn't it? But you know what I mean. If they have to deliver so much in one go, then maybe that's why it's been taken down.
I've got to say, if you were saying this any other week, like that Amazon can't possibly deliver all this, I'd have been calling you out. But with the way the reviews came out and the massive success the game has had so far critically, yeah, okay, I can see what you mean. I've got to say, I think Amazon can't possibly deal with the demand. Might be a bit much.
It's not so much. I don't know. It might just be that there's so many to deliver on, on release date, that it becomes too difficult.
Yeah.
But I don't know, because I assume that if you order something for release date specifically, they have to like get you like a courier or something, so it's not like delivered too early or something like that. I don't know.
No, they do tend to send them out with a sort of day or two on the other side, because like it's odd because Amazon can't really break a street date, as they don't fall under the same, as far as I'm aware, they don't fall under the same kind of rules in terms of that as somebody who has like a you can't sell this any other day, because like you don't pre-order in store the full game from HMV, for example, so they don't break street date in a different way. So that's why you do get people receiving games a day or two before they come out.
There is also talk that maybe there's some sort of dispute between Sony and Amazon, because apparently there's some other games that aren't available for pre-order.
Ooh, interesting.
Apparently Spider-Man and Detroit aren't available on Amazon.
Oh yeah, that points to something a little bit more systematic there.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Just found that out. So maybe there's some sort of dispute going on. Either way, it looks like they were talking beforehand about how God of War pre-orders maybe weren't as high as they wanted. It seems likely that's probably changed. I mean, I know that I've pre-ordered it since the announcements came out, so never pre-order games unless you really want them.
No, but I think pre-ordering at this point, when there's days to go and everyone is saying it's like an absolute win, I think that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, the lowest review at this point is 8 out of 10, which means that like the worst person thinks it's still a good game.
Yeah.
You know, so I can't. I'll be very surprised if I come back to you and are like, it is terrible. I don't really see it happening.
No, I don't know that. I think the game looks fantastic.
In related news, it was revealed that God of War 5 would also be set in Norse mythology. This kind of seems to suggest that they might be going for another trilogy, which is cool. And the part of me is kind of like, well, that means in this game, chances are we don't kill anyone too important. But maybe it will be a good introduction to the characters and set up the hype for the next one.
Yeah, it seems fairly likely. I think it probably would have been a fair bet to say it's another trilogy again, regardless of what they've said. That just seems to make sense for God of War. But yeah, it seems to have done. It's getting incredibly good scores. It's getting incredibly good reception and respect, and good on them. And I must say, as somebody who's not a PlayStation person, it was nice this week that Ryan McCaffrey, who's a journalist at IGN, not called out, that's kind of the wrong words, but he made a tweet saying as much that this is the kind of thing that Xbox is definitely lacking. And it's nice to see that like there's a general sort of knowledge that this is the way the industry is going to some extent, certainly in single player.
There's a very interesting article that I'll send you, but it's on Kotaku, about how kind of the focus on it's very not biased, even though it's going to sound like it, but how God of War is kind of the difference between Sony and Microsoft this generation is that Sony are kind of after making like one or two games that knock out the park, you know, the huge AAA titles, whereas Microsoft is all about being the place where you play your games. And God of War is an example of this, where it's huge AAA title. You know, game that's going to be up there in the game of the years, because unless like something comes out that's like in the 99s, you know, Red Dead Redemption, I know, but like it is going to be a game that we talk about at the end of the year, and so that's kind of Sony's aim, is always to be in that place. Mm-hmm. Whereas Microsoft is to be, we have all of the games in the best graphics and cheapest, not all of the games. We've got most of the games in the best graphics, you know, and you can have your Game Pass, and it's very kind of interesting in the different paths that they take.
I mean, I think this would make a really good topic at some point down the line. Maybe it speaks to the kind of very different cultures that they come from originally. Xbox is very very grounded in America, very grounded in that kind of everything's fine Western marketing mentality, whereas Sony does have a more of a Japanese, and it's stereotypical to kind of say honor to them, but they do tend to be a little bit more open and transparent when something's gone wrong. You can look at the PlayStation outage from years ago and how they dealt with it at E3 as a major sign of that. And Phil Spencer was good at first because he seemed to be adopting that kind of thing, whereas now I feel it's slipped out of his hands a little bit. But this is all for another week when we don't have successes to trumpet on either side. So congratulations to the people at Sony Santa Monica. God of War seems incredibly well made, and all the people who get to play it. I hope you enjoy it. Speaking of interesting articles coming out of Kotaku, this week Jason Schreier wrote a very, very interesting piece on 2K and the death of Mafia 3. The article is basically a thing called a post-mortem, which is where a game has sort of finished its cycle. It's not likely to sell anymore majorly. There's not likely to be any more content for it. You look at the game in its entirety, from development and inception to publishing and after support, and you see where it went right and where it went wrong. Now, a lot of games have done this. The Arkham games used to do this as live panels at cons, which was really interesting. But the interesting nugget that came out of this post-mortem is that 2K is staffing up and working on a new game in a major franchise. In fact, it was dropped fairly out there that 2K is working on a secret Bioshock game.
Yeah, it was very hidden, if you like. There's kind of a very long post-mortem of Mafia, and then just one sentence in there is people were moved to a different project working on Bioshock.
Yeah.
Rest of the article. And yeah, so this is something that we didn't know about. Interesting. Plus, considering that the timeline here, it's something that we should be hearing about very soon, I would think.
Yes. I don't know. See, this is the thing. Like, if the first question is like, when was this article actually researched and written? You know, what was this recent? Was this, from the perspective of a year ago? Where is that game now? Also, there's no guarantee that the game is still being made. Like, if it was from a year ago, there's no guarantee that it hasn't gone through development hell at this point, that it hasn't been shut down at this point, or it's not already been made at this point. It being said from behind closed doors, that's something that's information that we just aren't privy to. I've got to imagine that however he found this information out, it's something that 2K didn't want out, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is something that it's a bit of a shame, actually. I kind of complained a little bit about this article, just because I think like it is something that would be really interesting if it had been a really big surprise on stage. I mean, it will be anyway, of course. It's just that going from nothing to something is kind of more than going from something we think is there to something tangible. But like, I'm optimistic about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I am as well. Jumping back, if you don't mind me saying, to that point previously, I think that it would be fascinating to find out. I think down the line, if this game comes out and knowing where it comes out, it will be really interesting to know where he got that information. Like, is it just a case of they took, like, in a matter of friendliness, they took him next door and showed him what it was? Did he have to find out from somebody? Did somebody tell him accidentally on the record? That would be, as somebody who's quite interested in journalism as an industry, that would be fascinating to know what went wrong. So, what do you want out of a new Bioshock game?
No microtransactions.
I want an actual Bioshock game, please.
Yeah, an actual Bioshock game. It's worth saying that this is 2K, the people who recently said we shall put microtransactions in all of our games, or something along those lines. I believe it was. It's not the exact quote, but it was along the lines of, we will be looking maybe at putting transactions in every game going forward. So I hope that that's not the case for this, considering that Bioshock isn't really the style of game for that. I do think that we're very likely to see a multiplayer mode in Bioshock, though. I can't say for certain, but I would be very surprised if there wasn't a multiplayer of some sort to it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
While there hasn't been for the previous games, it kind of seems likely that it's the kind of thing that would happen. But let's talk a bit more positively. Um, I really liked Bioshock series. We should have a talk on someday about Bioshock Infinite and what I've got wrong, what my problem is with it. But um, my opinion changed on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's mostly because if you compare like what we saw when it was initially announced to now, it kind of felt like I didn't mean to as I talk now, but it kind of felt like what they started off with was Last of Us Bioshock Edition, or Bioshock The Last of Us, or whatever you want to call it. Something that was like really deep and personal, more than they did in the actual final game. While it still had those elements in the final game, it felt like compared to what they were working with in the E3 demos, it was definitely kind of toned down from there. And there was a few other stuff like how the open world would act and how you'd be able to deal with stuff. But anyway, like, it's a side thing to this. I'll be interested to see where they go with Bioshock and if what exactly this will be and where we will be. I kind of look forward to the mystery of it though, because it's going to be surprising, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely.
I wouldn't be overly surprised, however, if we kind of just went to Bioshock Rapture again. I think while they've set up this kind of precedent of being very random, I also think there's a chance they might just want to kind of go back to where they originally started with it.
See, I think the interesting part of what you're saying there is the they. I think it's very much based on who is making this game, because I think we know that Ken Levine is off elsewhere doing other things, right?
Yeah, no, we do know that Ken Levine is not in the picture.
So we know it's still 2K, which is good, but 2K are a huge company, and developers and staff get shifted about a huge amount, I'd imagine, within a company of that size. It could be a lot of different people making it than it once was. So I don't know, like if it's a team made of similar people or with a similar ethic, that's great, and I can't wait for it. But I do kind of worry about what it is if it's just a generic 2K IP at this point. I think it was always made special by the people who made it, and I think that goes to be seen, because like Ken Levine went on to do, good stuff and tease stuff that people wanted in his new company, and then like you've got a lot of teams that splintered out of BioShock that made good things as well. And I think, like, personally, I know you are either undecided or haven't played Tacoma. Play Tacoma, but like the Fulbright company, who were massively responsible for Bioshock 2, or Bioshock 2's expansion, Minerva's Den, went off and made some of the best indie games in the past couple of years. Like that, it's a sign that good people made good games, went on to make good games elsewhere, and I hope that's the kind of lifespan of Bioshock again.
Yeah, and I really hope that this kind of sparks a bit more life into the series. It's about time that we got like a Bioshock for this generation.
Mm.
Am I right in thinking? Yeah, it's last generation, isn't it? Yeah. So it'd be nice to see something for this gen, and I will get it. So the Bioshock games always thrilled me, and I think this one hopefully will do the same. But you have to appreciate that, as you say, what we have so far is Bioshock is a thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to anything of meat. I do think though, if it is something that is coming out, there is a fair chance that we will hear about it at E3. I think if it's coming out, because we talked about whether like being in development doesn't necessarily mean it's close to release, or if it's ever going to release.
Yeah.
But if it is the case that this game has been worked on since Mafia 3, then, or at least since before Mafia 3, then it's kind of been worked on for 3 or 4 years. So
see, that's the bit where I think we might be going down two different paths here, because I took that to mean that it's been worked on post Mafia 3.
No. So the thing, I believe, oh no, You might be right. But I think either way, if it was something that was done directly, Mafia 3 still released like 3 years ago. Yeah.
Mafia 3
Oh,
was...
teased 3 years ago. Damn.
I was going to say,
Okay, released 2
Mafia
years
3
ago.
has not been out all that long.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Damn. I am not good at this. I'm not a good researcher. Don't ask me to research things. So it was released about a year and a half ago. So maybe we're kind of 2.5 years in if it was done at the same time, but if it wasn't, a year and a half. I do think, though, we're in track to hear from it. We heard from Bioshock Infinite quite early compared to release.
I'm going to keep my mouth shut on this one. I think this will greatly affect our E3 predictions. Well, I think it will, because, like, we're expecting something big from 2K regardless of what it is. I personally am expecting another franchise, and you now seem quite sort of set on this being the case, or interested in it being the case. So I think
What other franchise would that be?
Well, if I told you, I'd be ruining our predictions, wouldn't I, you cheeky fucker? You know, with Red Dead coming out and with another franchise, whatever it be, looking like it's going to be on the case, 2K is going to have a massive profile at E3. It's just a case of what it's there with a profile of.
Yeah, and yeah, there's some more E3 stuff we need to talk about, but I can wait.
It can indeed, because that, ladies and gentlemen, is us wrapped up for this week. Mainly because my laptop is about to die. Lewis, thank you very much for joining me.
It's been good.
It's been good as ever. And thank you very much for joining us as well. If you like the show, you can feel free, if you want to like and subscribe to it so that you don't miss anything that we post and that you help us get a little bit more support from people. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you for your response to the last episode. It was something that was important to us because it's like personal stories and jazz, and people responded very nicely to it. So that was lovely. Have a lovely week. We'll see you for the next one. And until then, the game is in fact up.